and welcome to the Real Estate Mogul MD podcast. Thanks for tuning in and taking control of your financial future. This is a show where we not only motivate and inspire, we give you actionable, real-world experience to help you live life by design. You'll hear journeys and stories from other physicians, investors, coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, Brett Riggins. So what would it be like if we never had to sit through a lecture at all in college? What would it be like if you never had to sit through a lecture in med school? What if there was a way that you could get a video summary of those lectures and never had to sit through them? It's something called flipping the classroom. And man, I'm just curious to see, is that possible in real estate? Can we do that with real estate knowledge? Can we do that with financial knowledge? Can we do that along the way through med school? Well, I'm excited to talk with today's guest, who is the co-founder and CEO of osmosis.org, Shiv Gaglani. All right. So, Shiv, just to let the listeners know a little bit about your background and kind of like where you started, how you bumped into this whole medicine and education and finance and all of this stuff. Tell us a little bit about where you got started in this journey.
Yeah. So my dad's a retired physician. My mom's a physical therapist and my sister's a dentist. So the joke is,
oh, wow.
Between all the Gaglani family, they can treat anybody for anything. And so it's really in my blood. I grew up, going to the hospital my dad worked at, and getting really excited about the impact he was having on people's lives. Obviously he was a doctor in our community in South Africa, so got a lot of respect from people. And so that was very formative for me and got me interested in medicine early on. And then education was very much from other personal experience. We were immigrants from India to Africa to the US, and education was the great equalizer, the great unlock for me and many other immigrants. The fact that I, worked hard and learned, did science research, was good at science and math and engineering, helped me get scholarships to pay for college and then get into med school and business school. And so very much made a big impact on myself personally. And so I would like to I started paying that forward in college and started mentoring a lot of high school students, helping them get into college, SAT, ACT prep. And then when I got into med school, I did the same thing for medical students and pre-medical students. And it was really at that intersection of medicine and education where Osmosis ultimately was born.
And very interesting. There's so much I want to dive into. First of all, I can't leave the family medicine piece of this. So you grew up as a child of a physician. And I was just speaking with Cody Ye yesterday. He was also a child of a physician. He's not a physician himself, but he is now an educator basically in the finance world. So it's very interesting to get his opinion growing up. Like, what was that like for you? Because there seems to be this gap between like wealth in medicine. Like there's a separation in this area, and I'm sure the listeners can connect with that. Like when we specialize so much in our fields, myself, I was engineering background, so that's what my field was. But in particularly in medicine, when we put so much focus on that, we do not have that business piece in school. We don't get that finance piece in school. So what was that like as the child of a physician? Did you feel that as you were growing up, with your family?
Yeah, fortunately, not as much. I mean, I healthcare is interesting because, it is a very lucrative profession. Generally, it's very stable. A lot of immigrants gravitate towards careers in healthcare or engineering or law, but, medicine is typically considered a safe path because it's recession proof. People always need, healthcare. Obviously the models are changing from fee for service to value based. Compensation differs. I was just in London for a month, in July, and a lot of physicians or medical students there are looking to leave because the compensation is just not there for the path. The journey is very long. You can make a lot more money if you go into being a hedge fund manager or something like that. So, with my family, my dad practiced at a time where, you could still do really well in medicine and even as a solo practitioner. But in his case, he wound up taking administrative positions and running a hospital. So certainly we got a lot of respect in the community, not necessarily just because he was well paid in Africa, but also because the work he did. It's very meaningful. He met a lot of people who were eternally grateful to him for his services, saving their child from some condition or things like that. So over time, though, it's been interesting because I think I've realized that when you're in healthcare, a lot of times money is like a dirty word. Capitalism is a dirty word. And so someone has to figure out their identity of like, there's a trade-off between kind of giving all your services away for free versus, charging appropriately for them. And appropriately is the key word, because there are a lot of people who I think, do not do the appropriate thing when it comes to patient care, especially in fee-for-service models where maybe they're doing one too many surgeries that aren't necessarily indicated for an 80-year-old patient. Do they need a hip transplant? It's unclear. Probably not for their quality of life. So it's a kind of a meandering answer, but it's definitely influenced seeing my own personal family journey, influence how I think about the intersection of healthcare and finance.
Very interesting. And in that path, it may be lucrative, but it's always, there's that requirement of time to make that money. So do you feel that, not to dive too far into the parent situation, but still sitting on that, Shiv, do you feel that you saw your dad making investments to stop trading time for money? I mean, he went from medicine to admin, but then was there some sort of exchange that happened that allowed him to still make money and step away from medicine?
In his case, yes, he actually wound up buying, when we moved to the US, he didn't practice. He wound up becoming an educator as well. My mom practiced. My sister became a dentist, as mentioned. So my dad wound up buying several properties in Florida and renting them out as well. So certainly, but he has been trading some of his time in terms of managing those properties. He's much more actively involved. My sister, I've seen that very acutely where, she and her husband are both very successful dentists in Chicago, and they've scaled out and now they own 7 dental practices, and are increasingly, diversifying their assets and trying to, work on the business instead of working in the business as the top producers in their dental practices. But yeah, it's something I hear from a lot of clinicians, whether they're medical or dental or my mom's physical therapy, is how do you scale that? My mom herself has taken a lot of what she's done and turned it into books and courses. So even when she's sleeping, people, halfway around the world are being able to benefit from her protocols for treating incontinence with pelvic floor physical therapy. So I've definitely seen it from my family too.
And that's awesome. That's kind of now into this realm of osmosis, your platform. We could talk about that in a second. But like what your mother was doing with once you record and you make that, not only does it create this in a way where you're charging for this, is creating a way to create income for yourself, but it's also sharing that knowledge all the time, like 24/7, even beyond you. So when the person that creates something like this is no longer around, then that shared experience, the shared knowledge is still there and it carries on. It's such a very cool thing. And the way that you talk about your experience and now in the education platform, tell us a little bit about osmosis then.
Yeah. So when I was a first year medical student, I was sitting in endless lectures, a parade of lectures that were 60 to 90 minutes long. And it was just not the most efficient way to learn. A lot of these things we had learned already in college and even in high school biology. And then we're spending, $80,000, $60,000 a year to sit in very redundant courses. And so I got a little frustrated with the way medical education was not super modernized, where you could flip the classroom as has been happening in high school and college, and decided to leave med school, take a gap year and start building something called Osmosis, which is the best way to think about it. It's a virtual med school. We now sell to over 250 schools, including NYU, Kaiser Permanente, Imperial College London, and many more. And they essentially are buying a library of content that take these 60-minute lectures, turn them into 6-minute, highly engaging YouTube style videos, whiteboard style. And we have over 2,500 of these. So they've basically virtualized a lot of what med school is. And in working with some of these schools like University of Vermont, we helped them go from a 4-year program to a 3-year program because a lot of their first 2 years of preclinical curricula have been virtualized and and made into more active learning formats with osmosis. So left med school to start this. There were just two of us at the time. We grew that to about 100 people, about 10 million revenue. And then a large publisher called Elsevier, which has been around for 140 years, bought the company in late 2021, which freed me up to actually go back to med school. So I'm back as a third year med student, using osmosis to hopefully finish this time around.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations, one, on starting that journey, two, starting that journey, and three, still being in the journey. I mean, as an entrepreneur, to build something is amazing, but to build something that's scalable and sellable is a massive feat. So congratulations.
Thank you. No, it's been quite a journey of ups and downs, but so much good learning and some great friendships have come from it.
Yeah. Yeah. And now getting the chance to go back and almost, you just said it, using this platform that you've created as a virtual replacement, right? That's pretty cool to use in yourself. Shiv, you said flip the classroom. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so there's this term in education, flipped classroom, where basically most of education is real-time synchronous education, right? You go to school with sit in a classroom with 20 people or 200 people, and this professor lectures to you. And then when you go home, you do the homework, right? You do the practice questions or you do the essays or whatnot. This is the reverse, where instead of using class time with your teacher to get this passive form of lecture, the night before you watch the video, right? Whether that's a long recorded lecture or an osmosis video that's only 10 minutes. So you learn about, say, electrocardiograms the night before or the week before. And then when you go to class, when you actually have that really distinguished professor sitting in front of you who, in many cases, is a great researcher or a great clinician, you use the time with them to do problem-based learning, more active forms of learning, where, say, they put up a case, this is a 34-year-old male with XYZ condition, and you work through the case with them or with your classmates while that professor is helping you think through it and develop that clinical reasoning skills. So a lot of groups like Khan Academy have popularized flipped classroom, and osmosis and several others in health education have helped kind of push that evidence-based educational technique into those programs.
Very cool. So kind of like building that foundation prior to being in front of your experience or your mentor. I mean, in that regard. So I'm going in, I have my studies, and in the case of osmosis, it's a compressed study, like getting right to the point. That way, when I can make more efficient and bring more value out of the time that I am spending in person. That's very interesting. So I love this platform, and I can't help but to think how like at some point will this platform kind of include the finance piece and the investing piece and the real estate piece, all these things that I hear, and you probably hear. I hear it day in, day out, every single day. I wish I would have started investing in real estate. I wish I would have started investing. I should have done this. I didn't learn this in med school. I didn't learn all this. So it's a big challenge, Shiv, of the way, and I know you know this, changing the set way of education because of so many things tied to it. So how do you see this kind of, or is there a way possible to start including some of these other things in the path of the osmosis style, flipping the classroom,
Yeah, it's a great question. And it reminds me of that proverb, which is, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. And the second best time is today. And so that's why I'm a fan of the work that you're doing and others as well, who are helping clinicians, reduce one major stressor in their life by becoming more financially independent, whether they want to be, retire early, or whether they just want to not have so much debt burdening them, or they want to have passive income streams and not trade time for money as much as possible. So for osmosis, one way we help is by making the core journey of becoming a physician and studying for tests and studying for the classroom more efficient. It hopefully frees up students' time so they have more time to pursue other interests, whether that's just hanging out with family or friends or playing their saxophone. Ideally, for a lot of them, it's also getting educated, getting literate, learning finance, starting to invest. What's an ETF? What's a REIT? Those kind of things they'll have more time for when they use osmosis because it's more efficient. And then within osmosis, we've definitely done some content around the economics of healthcare. So, for example, we did a video with the white coat investor some years ago, 5 things you should know about paying for med school. because not every student is that financially literate about debt. Like they can tell you everything about a disease or a drug side effects, but they don't know much about, what layered levels of debt are, or, how to open up an index fund, or what's a Vanguard. So like those types of things are pretty essential, especially because one of the leading reasons clinicians feel so burned out is because of the financial debt burden they get. The median medical student graduates with $200,000 of debt. And so if it's possible to help them become more financially free earlier in their careers, they can not only choose specialties that maybe align with who they really want to be, as opposed to just the high paying lifestyle type specialties. But they also will free themselves up to hopefully become better clinicians, but also every other hat they wear, which is, parents or husbands and wives, etc. So I'm a huge fan of financial literacy and education, especially for our audience.
It's very interesting. And Jim Dahle, I think is how you say his name, Dahle, over there at White Coat Investor. Great place. I love that resource. Along with, Bigger Pockets is another massive resource. And I love connecting, building these networks and then sharing these experiences with everybody. I absolutely love that, because Shiv, it's planting the seed. And just like what you were talking about 5 years ago, when you recorded that video with Jim, it was Jim or James. I apologize. I don't know which one it goes by.
Here's the Jim.
It was, it was planting that seed, and that begins the curiosity. And that's like the beginning of learning, right? Understanding, knowing what questions to ask, learning what you don't know. I mean, sometimes that blinds us so much, just not knowing what we don't know. And if we carry on feeling like we know certain things and we're way off the path of where we should be, that's so dangerous. But planting the seed. So, boy, I would love to throw it out there, Shiv, is what if there was a way that we could do that with, say, single family rentals? Is there a seed that we could plant to say, hey, this is what it is? Not that you have to do it in any market or, any specifics, but just the bare essentials of that.
Yeah, I think a lot of our audience would be very interested in learning about that. And I've met some physicians who in med school started investing in real estate and have done really well. Like they just bought one property, maybe they bought a property when they were going to med school, and then they kept it and kept renting it and having a passive income stream, even when they went somewhere else for residency. And then in residency, they bought another property. And so they keep getting this portfolio approach. And so, yeah, I would love to, whether it's on our podcast or it's some other forum, be able to help educate our audience about some of the stuff you're doing.
And the simple stuff too, like even for the listeners out there, again, the thing that you think you know, but you don't really know. So just the basics of what expenses are there, because those are the things that will surprise people. And then all of a sudden their taste has differed on ever wanting to invest in real estate again, kind of thing. And it's not that real estate is the only investment in the world that makes sense. It's an investment that has stood the test of time, and everybody has the opportunity, more or less, to grab a piece of that piece. Because just like you say, you start by acquiring a house, and then you move on. You can rent that house out, but just planting that seed, I think, would be wonderful on the basics. This is what to look out for. This is what a return. This is how you figure it. This is your team. I think that would be really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are a lot of stories that'll come out of the woodwork when that content is shared. And I'm sure you hear from tons of these physicians and others who've gone down that journey.
Yep, absolutely. So you, in your investing path, now you tell me that your father had some places in Florida, and he was actively involved in that. And I say, in real estate, there's no passive income, right? And I don't believe there's any passive income in anything, because nobody's going to care more about your money than you. So it can be as passive as ever you want it to, but in that regard, you could be losing more than you could ever make in that regard. But the passive income side, so he's got some properties in Florida. And it sounded like your sister was acquiring some real estate as well, too. What's Shiv doing?
Yeah. When I was in med school at Hopkins, the first time around, I bought a house. And so that's being rented out right now. And my dad just helps with some of that before. But I've also, then I moved to Utah while I was building out osmosis. I bought a house here. And it actually is it's in Park City. And so, it's a different type of rental where instead of long-term leases, I have a property manager here, like a vacation property type thing. And so it's being Airbnb'd and verboed quite a bit when I'm gone, because I don't spend that much time out here as much anymore. Most of that's kind of my real estate. I have a REIT I've invested into, but most of my investments have actually been, in equities and bonds. Especially after the sale, I had a liquidity event and I was starting to diversify. And so I also have some investments in venture capital firms, and that's largely because that's where I came from. I came from a tech. I started Osmosis. It's an health education tech platform. A lot of the VCs that invested in us, I've invested in them now. And a lot of that comes with advising, and I like investing in what I know, and I'm actively starting to know more about real estate because, a lot of my mentors, a lot of my board member and a lot of other advisors, talk about real estate quite a bit and all the advantages that you get from doing that. Everything from 1031 exchange to depreciation. So still getting educated on that, at the moment.
Yeah, and there's a lot that goes into it, and you definitely hear a lot of people talking about it. It's always around you. One thing that you mentioned there, I didn't want to slide too far past, was liquidity event. That's what you called it, right? Liquidity event. Yep. So like a triggering event, a liquidity event. And that happens when we go through this journey and we create this object of value, a business. And when we sell that business, typically we can write it up in a couple different ways, trying to be as tax advantageous as possible. And as you're building that business, that's something you should be thinking about. And I'm saying this because I know a lot of our listeners have their own practices. And I've worked closely with physicians who have then sold those practices and then have this event. So what I wanted to do is just make sure that everybody starts hearing this word out there. Because in that regard, it's going to create a lot of opportunity for you, and it can also create a lot of stress for you because you've got this now, these lump sums coming in, and now what are you going to do with it? And at that point, it may be too late when you're looking at tax strategies. It may be too late when you're looking at investments to get it to move right away. So I just wanted to bounce back on that word liquidity event. I think that's something that I want the listeners to hear and congratulate you again on, because that's a big turning point in life and being able to, roll that into something. Your Airbnb, when you say that you've got a property manager, tell us a little bit about how involved you are when you do go away.
Yeah, I'm not that. This one I'm paying for it. Park City is a very expensive place in terms of property management. They're taking 20 to 40% commission depending on the property management company. I chose one that I would have to do as little as possible, just because I've been, going back to med school. My time is very limited, so I don't do any of the bookings. I don't do the cleanings. I literally just go on and book when I want to be there, and then otherwise it's just interesting, free and open. But I definitely have talked to a bunch of other property managers, or I have some friends out here in Park City who do it the other way, where maybe they'll do the bookings, but then they have some crew doing the handiwork and the cleanings, and other people who do it all. And for me, it's just getting clear on your values and what you want to do with your time. And for me, time is just, you can trade time for money, you can trade money for time. And in this case, I think I'm trading a little more money for the freedom of time, where I don't have to, answer a call. Or, for example, I was in Africa visiting some of our clients at Osmosis. Not the best internet where I was, and I got this notification from my property manager saying, "Hey, like, your fridge broke. We've got to be able to change it for the guests that are visiting there. It's going to cost $140 to get this part or something." And all I do is just email back, "Yeah, go ahead." Yeah. Versus if I was managing it myself, I'd have to find a fridge repair person. And certainly in Baltimore, that's what's happening with the house there. It's much more active. The handy people, we call it. We get the roof estimates. So just knowing where you are, and ideally having a structure where you can flex between the two, right? Because maybe there's times in your life where you're busier, and there's other times in your life where maybe you're willing to be more actively involved.
And I love that. And from the investor perspective too. Like I see like that 20% pocket for listeners out there looking at Airbnbs, like that 20% is a full management kind of pocket. And the less you go down, maybe the more properties you have or the less value you're getting from them. And then up, anywhere above that 20, 30, 40, I'm going to be expecting red carpet service. I'm going to be expecting them to take care of me all in my every little whimper. I want them to take care of me. And then one thing for you, Shiv, I don't know if you've heard of this yet. There's an app called Turno that helps you connect. It'll connect with your Airbnb app. And there's an app called Guesty as well too. So those two apps are great to connect to try to automate some of that stuff. One other thing that made me think of too is setting a limit with your property manager to make sure, like say $300 is a very a good, 250 to 300. So anything under 300, like I only want to see it on my owner statement, and anything other than that, don't bother me. Take care of it, right? Some fun things there. What would you have done differently looking back, 10 or 15 years with regards to real estate?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good skill to have, just, like handy skills. For example, like I've seen my dad, I've gone to the properties he has in Florida. I've gone out to Baltimore where I have the house, and there's so many things that you get charged a lot for that, just because it's almost like, I think doctors and mechanics are often compared to each other, but same with like plumbers or electricians. There's so many things that if you don't just get a little educated, and there's no excuse nowadays with YouTube, with podcasts like yours and other people you can go to like get a basic level of understanding of what's going on, because there are things that you could be charged $1,000 for that if you just have a bit of handy knowledge, like if you take 20 minutes, you could just do it yourself for like $50. Yeah. Just in anything, it's good to get that to reduce that information asymmetry that exists with most professions, whether it's your mechanic or your doctor or your plumber, as mentioned. So I think just starting to compound and develop more of those skills, because it sounds like, oh, I don't have time for that and I'm so busy. But if you approach learning that with the same curiosity that you approach learning medicine, because ultimately, if you can treat a body, you can definitely treat a house. A body is much more complicated than things in the house within reason. So I think that's one thing personally I would do differently. And then maybe another thing is, obviously the last 20 years, real estate prices have gone way up in most markets. It's been really great. It's hard to know. I didn't have the liquidity I have now 20 years ago, so I probably wouldn't have been able to invest in as much as much property, but clearly that's been a great outperforming asset class over the past, 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially there in Park City, right?
Yeah, Park City is one of those pandemic booms as well. So
yeah, that's awesome. And, kind of touch on that too, that just like that childlike curiosity that it takes to gain, that's also going to give you leverage. It's going to give you leverage. I always love looking back at examples through the years when I have a contractor, hey, how much is it going to cost? Right. And then they give me this line of BS about this, that, and the other thing. But since I have experience, since I have a little bit of experience and a little bit of knowledge, you're like, well, did you try this? Or how about this? Right. So it gives you that ability to leverage when you're having conversations, not just doing these things, but it gives you the ability to leverage and negotiate yourself better deals. Knowledge is power. And when you go out and get that knowledge, you're going to gain more power along the way. But I also caution everybody too to not feel like you know everything just because you watched the YouTube video. Don't be the guy at Home Depot selling me on something that you think you know when you're way off, right? Because that's going to create so much more work for me. And I say it with a smile on my face, Shiv, because it happened so many times, and I just stopped asking for help at Home Depot and Lowe's.
Yeah, I bet that's funny. I agree too. I mean, again, I can't tell you how many arguments I've gotten in with my dad about how much what's the right balance between trading time for money and money for time. It very much differs by your values and what you're going through. But I say that, I mean, because you asked the question of what I would have done differently, I would have gotten a lot more educated about these things earlier. But it's never too late, as I mentioned. And I tend to lean towards, an hour of my time is worth a lot of money. And so I prefer to just pay someone who's an expert who I trust. I think that's the key is like once you find people that you trust, whether it's a property manager or a handy person, making sure that you keep them engaged. And maybe they're more expensive than the next person slightly, but if you have deep trust, and if some of the best vendors I've met are the ones who actually educate me too. Like they aren't trying to keep the information. Like they're the ones who I'm there with them as they're updating the roof. And then I learn a lot about roofs for that day.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yep. Sharing the knowledge. That's absolutely important. And with that in mind, Shiv, who is one person that you would suggest that our listeners should know?
I think a person who's been really influential to me in recent years is Naval Ravikant. He started AngelList. He's an amazing investor out of Silicon Valley, like early in Uber, Airbnb, and others. But more importantly than his investing prowess, he's very philosophical and talks a lot about kind of like Morgan Housel. I'm sure you and your listeners know on money, psychology of money. So there's a book called The Almanac of Naval Ravikant, which I recommend. And there's a lot of really interesting frameworks he provides as to, how to live a life of meaning and how to be healthy financially and also physically.
Very cool. So we'll put that out there and give the listeners a chance to look. I'll put it in the description as well too. If anybody wanted to reach out to you, I know I've got your LinkedIn connect, and that's how we connected. How could the listeners connect with you, Shiv?
Yeah, I'm the only Shiv Gaglani on LinkedIn as far as I know. So they can do that. And my email is pretty easy. It's just my first name, Shiv, my last name, Gaglani @gmail.com. So I always love connecting with people and being helpful however I can be.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, man. Very cool to share your journey and your experience. And you're in the middle of finishing up med school. What piece of med school, like what's going to be the twist for Shiv? Where are you headed here in the next 5 years?
I'm most interested in psych and neuro because it's just how the brain works. I mean, that's what osmosis is. It's learning science. It's how the brain works. And so I'm most interested in that field. So if I do residency, it's probably going to be there, but I may also just start something else that helps people in that field.
Awesome. Well, again, congratulations to you and your journey and your team, because I know you couldn't get to anywhere you're at without developing a very, very cohesive and functional team. So that's a challenge and a victory in and of itself that we didn't even talk about. So congratulations on the liquidity event and off to your new journey in med school. Shiv, thank you for your time. And to the listeners out there, thank you again for today. Thank you for giving us your attention. If you have any questions for us, feel free to give us an email, info@physicianwealthsystems.com. And stay tuned. We'll catch you on the next Real Estate Mogul MD podcast.